Right, welcome to Bet the Edge. I'm Jay Croucher here with Drew Dinsick, recording on a Thursday afternoon, about 30 minutes after Victor Wembanyama was ruled out for the season with deep vein thrombosis. We're going to talk about that, all of the ripple effects into various markets, and then we'll close out by talking about the Friday slate. But let's start off with the big news, Drew. We'll talk about Defensive Player of the Year, Rookie of the Year, how it affects Stephon Castle, but just specifically with the strength of the Spurs, how do you project this team going forward?
Well, I mean, now the calculus changes not just in terms of how you rate them as a team, but like, well, what are they trying to do, right? It's not completely out of reach that this team really does position themselves for the draft, which to me means, you lean into usage for Castle. You maybe even consider kind of putting Fox on ice at some point. I'm not sure that Fox really has any kind of potential for milestones this year, so don't think there's any real negative to just kind of giving him a little bit of a blow so he can kind of be on just kind of peak form for next year. But from a team rating standpoint, let's assume that Fox is still a go and that now a lot of the usage from Wemby gets shifted into the guard play. My rating from them with a healthy Wemby was a 0.6. I had them kind of right around the middle class of the NBA. Obviously, a better than average defense, worse than average offense. Now you take him out of the mix. I'm a minus 4 almost, 3.9. I would have them as the 25th best defense. So really where this kind of hurts them is, as you would expect, the defensive efficiency for this team is going to suffer. And I think the expectation of them being favored in many games from here to the finish line is low. They have a I wouldn't say it's it's an especially tank friendly schedule. But 3 games left against the Pelicans. Obviously those will be unwatchable. 2 games, 2 games against the, one against the Hornets, 1 against the Nets, which probably won't be very competitive. Other than that, they don't have a lot of other games where it's like they're really up against another team that's truly trying to position themselves for the draft. So we could see San Antonio accumulate a lot of losses from here to the finish line.
Yeah, I naturally agree. With Wemby off court, the Spurs this year are a -8 net rating. The defense
Wow, really?
is the offense is terrible. The defense is awful as well. They just don't have a great deal of talent on the team, and so normally when an injury like this happens, I immediately look to the schedule and see which teams are going to disproportionately benefit from, going from playing a team with a top 10 player to now a team that doesn't have that player. And nothing particularly leaps out. Like they play the Pelicans 3 times. Great. They do play Phoenix twice, which may have some ripple effects around the fringes of the play-in, given that I think that Phoenix were likely going to miss the play-in. And now the San Antonio just gets essentially removed as a play-in candidate, which is great for Phoenix. And then Phoenix also gets to play them twice. One other ripple effect off of that, as we kind of segue into Defensive Player of the Year. So the Spurs do play Cleveland twice. And, these are very marginal gains for Evan Mobley's Defensive Player of the Year candidacy. But now that Wemby has been ruled out and he was, a minus 2,500 favorite, and as we talked about earlier in the week, it was likely just going to walk to the award. Now that he is disqualified, he didn't meet the game's minimum. Jaren Jackson and Evan Mobley are now the tier 1 in this market. Jaren Jackson has reopened minus 125, Evan Mobley minus 110, and then Lou Dort is the third favorite ahead of Shea and Bam and Jalen Williams, who I think we'll talk about those guys, but how would you price just Jaren versus Mobley at the top of the board now?
I was well positioned in this market, thanks largely to the conversations we've had about, well, if not Wemby, who? Because as I was kind of talking about when we were discussing the DPOY last week. I really didn't think there was. I had a spidey sense that there was going to be a shutdown. I had no idea that this was going to be, coming out of the All-Star break, surely. So I kind of I'm pretty evenly staked between those two guys. But I agree with your sentiment from last week that Mobley should be the favorite. And honestly, because the market sort of backed up where I thought it was going to go, I didn't really, I didn't really think hard about this until just kind of flipping through some of the efficiency stats, flipping through some of the counting stats for this year. And I got to tell you, I don't actually feel as good as I thought I would. Like, I don't think Mobley or JJJ, who, pick your horse if you have both. I don't know that this is a slam dunk. The story for defense now kind of becomes, is either, in my opinion, again, story for defense for the season kind of becomes like, well, we're really not going to recognize one of the players on the best defense that has existed in modern NBA history with the Oklahoma City Thunder. And with the Thunder, it's tough to single out a single player because they're all so good and because they all help each other so much as far as efficiency ratings goes. Obviously, Chet Holmgren is disqualified. I think Hartenstein is disqualified. Yeah, he missed 20 games, so he's done. That kind of leads you with SGA and Jalen Williams, who are both, very high efficiency players defensively. And the market seems to want a healthy amount of Lou Dort here, which, I mean, okay. Does not pass the smell test at all. He's like the sixth best defender on the team, although he does take on like a very important role for them. So it's to me, I'm kind of thinking through sort of the black swan of, hey, you caught huge prices on the guys that are now 50-50 in this market, but what is there some other, kind of come from the clouds candidate here? Is there a Chris Dunn candidacy coming from the clouds? Is there a Zubac candidacy coming from the clouds? Is there a OKC by default? We're giving it to a player who we think represents their defensive grind, like a Dort, who we just want to kind of recognize for the fact that the Oklahoma City Thunder right now have a defensive rating that looks impossible. They are a 105.4. The next best is the Magic at 109.2. That's unreal. And again, a lot of that is because their bench unit is super good defensively. So the overall team is just an absolute monster defensively. But, to me, slight favorite Mobley over Jackson. But I think those are fragile favorites.
Yeah, I agree that neither of those guys are ironclad, just given that, they're on the 7th and the 8th ranked defenses. And this is an award that, almost uniformly goes to guys who are on at least top 5 defenses, usually top 1, 2, 3 defenses. Now, Wemby was going to break that mold, but he kind of exists in his own universe, universe unicorn, a universal unicorn. I do think that if OKC has a candidate, I just think it has to be Dort, and I don't think that is probably correct on merit. I would say that Chet is clearly the best defensive player on the team, but he's not going to qualify. I think Alex Caruso is the second best defensive player on the team. He's also just not going to be a candidate because of the games and the minutes. So Dort is the guy. And the reason why Dort is the guy is because Oklahoma City are going to say that Dort is the guy, because Dort is the one who has been, he's been their ace perimeter defender who guards the toughest assignment every night, who guarded Luka Doncic in the playoffs every minute that he was on the floor. And, Chet earlier in the season's tweeting out Lou for DPOY. Like, Dort is just going to be their candidate that they push. You don't always have to, voters don't always have to go with the candidate who is pushed by the team or by public relations. But I think that the fact that Dort is the guy who guards the best opposing player, combined with all of that stuff, just means he's going to be their candidate. And people are going to draw comparisons to Marcus Smart, and it is similar in a way where Smart did not have the advanced stats to back up being Defensive Player of the Year. He didn't have a Sterling on-off, like Dort. The Thunder are 3.5 points better defensively when Dort is on the bench. Smart was about neutral. Mikal Bridges that year was a massive negative as well. People rationalized the way Bridges is poor on-off by saying that, well, he guards the opposing superstar. Of course, the on-off is going to be worse when he has to have those assignments and he's on the court the same time Luka is on the court or whoever he's guarding. And so that'll probably be brought up a little bit with Dort. But I think that this year, just the field has produced stronger candidates to take down a Marcus Smart type, where one, Dort doesn't, and people forget, like Marcus Smart, he got like traded to the Wizards for nothing. He has no pedigree at the moment. Smart at the time was like a guy who had been on all defensive teams. I don't believe Dort has ever been. And, he's Marcus Smart. He just been in our lives and in playoff series for a long time. And I think that he had a standing that Lou Dort doesn't quite have. And then also, like if Bam Adebayo just played 7 or 8 more games that year, Bam would have beaten Smart. It's just that Bam played like 56 games, I think, and it was just a little bit too few for voters to get behind. This year, I think that between Jaren and Mobley, that those guys are likely going to be too strong of a candidate for Dort to win, though I wouldn't rule it out. One guy who's not even listed, and look, I don't think he's going to win, but I do think he is either the 3rd or 4th most likely player to win. Rudy Gobert is on a better defense than either Memphis or Cleveland have right now and is quietly having, another excellent season. No one is going to want to vote for him, but there are worlds, I think, where the Timberwolves, that they can finish really strong and crack having a top 5 defense and finish on a little bit of a tear. Their remaining schedule is extremely easy. They have the 5th easiest schedule left in the league. Conversely, Jaren Jackson, who is the favorite in the market now, he has the 7th hardest. So I do think there are worlds where Gobert can end on a little bit of a tear, and right now they're the 6th ranked defense with a 110.2 defensive rating by NBA.com. They're less than a full point behind the Rockets in 4th. So if the Wolves get up to like the 4th ranked defense, then I think that, and the Grizz and the Cavs are 7th, 8th, 9th, that kind of range, then I do think there is potential for Gobert, though I don't think it's especially likely. But what do you think about that?
I'm open to it because again, like I'm searching for black swans here. The Dort thing is so weird though to me because you're like I honestly cannot. I could squint and see the smart case. You made the smart case on this podcast. I was like, okay, yeah, I get it. I can't squint and see the Dort case. Like I get.
It doesn't have a case on merit.
I know. It's a vibes
Smart
case.
Shouldn't have won, to be clear, like Marcus Smart probably shouldn't have won either. I think that Bam should have won, or Bam or Gobert should have won. But guys had
that was like a recognizing how good the Celtics defense was.
Yes.
Right. And he was like, okay, well, we got to give it to someone. This is a fun story. It's a fun narrative. Like if you are going to be like, well, if it's not the unicorn player, then it's the unicorn defense and we need to represent them. The numbers actually we already know Caruso ineligible. He's ineligible. Holmgren ineligible. Hartenstein ineligible. These guys have all missed 20 plus games. It's honestly the guy that it would go to if you said you must give it to a Thunder is probably SGA. SGA is top 2 in steals per game. He's top number 1 right now in defensive win share. He's top 12 in EPM in defensive efficiency. Just a hair behind Jalen Williams. Jalen Williams is not kind of accumulated counting stats enough. There's plenty of precedent of DPOY MVP being given to the same player. I don't know that SGA fits the mold of that type of player, but I don't know, man. I'm having a really, really tough time saying like what direction this goes in. I can just tell you that like I thought it was going to be obvious that Jackson and Mobley were going to stand above the rest, and the market obviously is there. But that might just reflect those of us who put money in and where the liability is now, as opposed to like that being right. Now, okay, I got to ask you, because you consume a lot of really smart NBA content. I know there was a lot to consume over All-Star break, kind of reflecting on the season because there was no games being played. Did you hear anyone make compelling cases for who they thought they would put first team all defense? Because I haven't heard Dort mentioned in that conversation. And for him to not be kind of already considered for all defense, and to leap to the guy that wins Defensive Player of the Year to me feels insane.
Yeah, no, I agree. And the other thing, the reason he is not Marcus Smart is that Marcus Smart was like clearly the leader of the Celtics defense, even though if some advanced stats had Robert Williams as the more impactful guy, as you know, the shot blocking big. One, Robert Williams got hurt at the end of the season, which kind of took him out of consideration and paved the way for Smart. And then two, like the advanced stats and everything, it was close enough. Like it wasn't a landslide or anything. And Smart was like the vocal leader, and he was the guy who, you know, would guard 1 through 5 and in national TV games be guarding Joel Embiid in the post. Like Smart had so much more of a defensive presence. Lou Dort, like you can argue. And I don't really want to make the argument that much against Lou Dort, so I have some Lou Dort at big prices. But in the name of fairness, I think there's a reasonable case to be made that Lou Dort is the 7th best defender on the Thunder. Like literally,
I think there's
he like Caruso, Chet, Hartenstein, J-Dub, SGA, and Casey Wallace all have better defensive EPMs than Lou Dort. So I think it's going to be it's too narrow of a gap to shoot. We'll see. This is now this is like Russia 1991 after the wall came down, this market. Like there is just a complete vacuum for a candidate to emerge. I suspect that everyone is going to really squint and try and find the Marcus Smart candidate.
Sure.
And I think just Evan Mobley or Jaren Jackson are probably just going to win because I think that they have fairly strong cases, but they're not ironclad. So definitely would leave the door open in terms of just off the top. Like I think, as for the reasons that we discussed, I'd give Mobley a slight edge over Jaren, but I think that's pretty close. And now that I was thinking about more of that in a Wemby in type of world where I thought Mobley had more ceiling. Now I have to kind of recalibrate that to just thinking in a Wemby out world. And my gut sense is Mobley, but I got to think about it a little bit more. In any case, I think it's very close. And then if I was just ordering candidates after that, like I think it's like Dort, Gobert. I don't think Bam can really do it. Like their defense is like 12th and the team is blah and his advanced stats are no good. People will make the case because it's Bam and he's a big name, but like how is he actually going to beat Jaren and Mobley? And then I just don't really see it with SGA or Jalen Williams. And like I just don't think Ivica Zubac can win Defensive Player of the Year when no one thinks he's the best guy. But Amen Thompson, I don't think so either. I think it's so hard for those guys to beat both of Jaren and Mobley.
Okay, I'm going to take a stand on SGA then. I don't know, be alone. 75-1. I already have some JJJ and Mobley. This is literally just, I feel like I thought it was going to look like, cool, 50-50 race. I got them both covered. Let's go. And I don't feel that way looking at sort of the way that the profiles stack up as you are trying to resynthesize this decision. And SGA to me, being on the Thunder, being number 2 in defensive rating, being number 3 in defensive box plus minus, being number 1 in defensive win shares, number 2 in steals per game. This feels like there's kind of a counting stat way that people just kind of come to that conclusion to recognize the Thunder. And again, like I'm living in a world where I'm over Thunder wins anyway. Like I think this team can get to 70. That's in the realm of possibility.
Yeah. I think that the issue with the Thunder and them having a candidate is they did have a candidate. His name was Chet Holmgren. He was going to win the award. Everyone thinks that he's the best defensive player, or at least the most impactful on the Thunder. And I think it's like the idea that we have to reward the Thunder with DPOY, even though we all think that Chet is the best guy. He just can't win. Like, I just don't think that there's going to be a compulsion to give it to a non-Chet Thunder player, but we'll see. I don't want to have, with a market like this that is in so much flux, I think you have to have, fairly soft convictions and be willing to change your mind as everything evolves. Let's go to Rookie of the Year, where Stephon Castle has moved into minus 165 to win the award after hovering in the kind of plus 110 type of range. Now, I think that is very logical that he should firm, given that Wemby just vacates a ton of usage. And also, like, someone has to play the minutes for the Spurs who can actually do something on offense. Now, the thing is that there's still a chance that Stephon Castle is going to be coming off the bench for what is now going to be a pretty bad team. And if he's just putting up, inefficient volume stats, as a kind of rich man's Zachary Ricochet the rest of the way. Which is all to say, do you agree with him, firming to the extent where he's gone from 50% in the market to, inching more towards 65%?
So just as far as the pie goes, I had about 20% of sort of the Spurs offense is now got to be reallocated. As I do that, Fox is your biggest winner. Number 2 is Harrison Barnes. And then Castle for me is third. Vassell also wins a bit, but not a lot. The biggest kind of shift here is probably Castle's minutes go up, right? Yeah. So it's going to go, it's going to go. I would say that this is probably gone.
Yeah,
I think Castle just wins.
I think the biggest shift is now that the Spurs won't be as interested in winning. And if they're not as interested in winning, that should mean just more spotlight and minutes for Stephon Castle. I would think that means that, Chris Paul is more likely to either kind of his role recede or just kind of be shut down at some point. But what is weird is like, what happens if Castle, who is not efficient and is not a very good offensive player, what if he is given the keys and he's shooting like 36% from the floor every night and, putting up the counting stats and averaging like 17 and 5 the rest of the way, but doing it on just comically bad efficiency? Like, is that going to beat Jalen Wells and Zach Edey because the counting stats are just there, or is that not going to resonate?
I think this becomes very tough it becomes very tough for me to find a way that people see the counting stats, chalk it up to, basically empty calories and don't give it to him. Like, he's going to have to absorb this usage and stink. Like, that's kind of the path. And maybe that's the way this goes. Maybe he hits a wall. Maybe he gets hurt. But ultimately, I think his price should be more like minus 400 right now.
Okay. Yeah, I think he's certainly, clear favorite over the field, and he has to firm off of this news. I just think that there is perhaps a little bit more variance than one might think just off the bat. By the way, as we've been speaking, the one place that is up with this market, Dyson Daniels has entered the market and is now the third favorite at 13 to 1, which
for DPOY?
Yeah. I don't think Dyson Daniels is winning this award on the
that's insane.
On the number 15 defense on a 26 and 29 team. Like, what is the world where Dyson Daniels beats both Jaren Jackson and Evan Mobley? Like, I just don't think.
I mean, that speaks to your thesis that somebody's going to turn this into a who's the Marcus Smart.
Yeah, which is always the fun thing to do in these markets, but sometimes the answer is just the obvious answer. And I think for now that Mobley and Jaren are around 90% of the equity in this market. And, maybe something will change on that front, but like, those guys have pretty solid cases. And I think that, this market runs through those two for now. Okay. Wow. Just saying the words Liverpool and Man City gives me goosebumps. Liverpool and Man City, two mainstays of Premier League title contention, go head to head once again. City hopes to break into the top 4 with a home victory over Mo Salah and the Reds. No, thank you. Watch the matchup live on Sunday at 11:30 a.m. Eastern, only on Peacock. We will do. I'm really basically now a Clippers fan and a Liverpool fan, so we'll do some Premier League recap after that match of massive proportions. But for now, let's talk about the Friday slate in the NBA. We have Knicks Cavs and T-Wolves Rockets, 2 games lined up. Knicks Cavs, which is probably not a series we'll see in the first 2 rounds of the playoffs, at least. Maybe we'll see it in the 3rd round if the Knicks can upset the Celtics, most likely. What do you think of this matchup, which has kind of almost in a way, this matchup particularly has defined this Cavs era because of how badly they got stomped in the playoffs by the Knicks 2 years ago? How do you think these iterations of the team stack up, and what do you think of this game in particular?
I think it's going to be a fun game. I like the way you're framing it because I had actually totally forgotten that series happened and that it was so decisively Knicks. it lacked a little bit of juice for me, just because I feel like we have absolutely solidified the 1-2 now as Cavs. I say solidified. I know there's like a 3-game gap for me as far as projected wins, so I shouldn't say that it's that in stone. But it feels very unlikely to me that this is going to be a series we see in the playoffs this year. The Cavs team is just a little still like regular season try hard. Some of that is just because of their mentality and the way that the coach kind of deploys minutes, and they, to me at least, stack up really well in this matchup, based on the fact that you're going to have the ability to kind of particularly go small against these guys in the clutch, and maybe even play Jared Allen off the court. I'm expecting OG Anunoby plays, and Mitchell Robinson, by the way, also maybe makes an appearance in this game. A full strength Knicks team to me is the bet here, and I think the fact that Cleveland is coming off of a road game at Brooklyn where they are expected to just absolutely dominate, and they may be able to rest some of their guys. New York is home against Chicago on Thursday. They will both be traveling from New York to Cleveland, so that basically neutralizes any kind of advantage in terms of just sort of rest and home court for the Cavs, from what I can tell you. And I think in general, the Knicks, to me right now, are a hair of a bet on relative to market with their players coming back. Right now, I have the Knicks as plus 4.4. They are the 7th best team for me in the NBA, 4th best offense, 14th best defense. Once you get a fully healthy Mitchell Robinson on the court, though, that changes bigly. OG Anunoby as well. So maybe I'm a little bit over my skis here, expecting those guys to be back and be full participants in this game. But this has kind of the whiffs of Knicks measuring stick. Cavs, kind of would like to win, but I don't know that they necessarily are exacting revenge from 2 years ago's playoff series. So ultimately, I'm going to take the points with the Knicks in this one.
Okay, let's jump to Wolves Rockets, matchup between apparently 2 Defensive Player of the Year candidates, and Rudy Gobert and Amen Thompson, though I don't think either of them are going to win. The Wolves are a bizarre team in that their underlying stats suggest that they are kind of trending in the right direction. The Wolves quietly have the 14th ranked offense, which if you just kind of, I think for the most part, watch their games and kind of tacitly pay attention to the vibes around the team, so it doesn't feel like the 14th. It doesn't feel like an above average offense. The defense is still elite, albeit not to the extent that it was last year. And now the Rockets are kind of scuffling all over the place. So what's your handicap of this? And do you expect that Houston will, once they get whole, which they may be whole for this game, we don't know yet, that they will kind of go back to their winning ways, and that this was just a typical mid-season skid?
I don't actually think that. I think that the Rockets are actually maybe like the 8th best team in the West. My numbers right now are not in love with them. Obviously, the story of them overachieving, the story of particularly Amen Thompson taking a huge step forward are awesome stories. And they have a lot of fun pieces who I would like to see continue their progression. But they have not really solved or figured out an identity in terms of how are they best served in terms of rotation at this point. And as you've kind of noted well, I thought this week they're under pressure to get Fred VanVleet more minutes. They're under pressure to get Jabari Smith some more minutes so that they can quote unquote turn things around. Whereas I think we've probably seen a little bit of an overperformance from a couple of these players, notably Dylan Brooks this season. And once you kind of correct for like how do we properly rate Jalen Green and Dylan Brooks right now, who are getting a ton of minutes and a ton of usage, I see this team more like a plus 0.5, plus 1. And that makes them about the 13th best team in the NBA. The offense is really what is a little bit concerning. I rate them the 17th best offense, 8th best defense, as currently expecting minutes distributions to be deployed with a full strength Rockets team. And then on the flip side, Minnesota for me right now, a little bit underrated. I don't know if you really kind of caught wind of sort of how their season has gone. And it's been tough to really kind of follow this carefully because it's like at times it hasn't really just been about who is available and just player health and availability, which has made things kind of confusing. But over the last 15 games, this Wolves team is just flat out good. Their net rating is sixth best in the NBA at a +7. They have a defensive rating that is much more what you would expect considering the players are on the floor in like the 110 range, with an offensive rating of 117, which is much better than what they were giving you earlier this season. So I kind of feel like the Wolves are the ones who are coming a little bit quietly right now in the West. And I think this game has the potential to open, in the ballpark of like maybe a small favorite for Minnesota. And I'm probably going to have a pretty significant play on the Timberwolves if they are either small dog or anything under 1.5 point favorites.
Okay. I think the Wolves are coming. They're coming for
Okay, so
a
you
round
agree.
two, a round two sweep at the hands of Oklahoma City. But I do think that the team, again, it's kind of it's a version of the same issues they had last year, where there is just a lack of overall just kind of feel and passing on offense. It's just the end of games for the Wolves are just diabolical, where it's Anthony Edwards playing Michael Jordan hero ball. And even though he made kind of leaps in terms of how cerebral he was as a player in the playoffs and making, I think, better decisions, particularly in those Phoenix and Denver series to start the playoffs, it descends into hero ball so much. And when you're closing games with Rudy Gobert and Jaden McDaniels and a lot of Nickeil Alexander-Walker or Nazare Julius Randle, I don't think of these guys as particularly astute offensive players. Mike Conley, I think, is really important in that regard when he's on the court, and he's just not quite at the same level that he was. So I think that team's path to becoming, a top 3-4 team in the West on team rating come playoff time is by really revving the defense up to being, the second or third best defense in the league. And they just haven't quite got to that level so far. Okay. Watch the biggest names in sports talk, including Mike Florio, Dan Patrick, Dan Lebitard, and Matthew Berrios. They cover the biggest moments on and off the field each weekday on the NBC Sports Now channel. It is now available on Peacock and free on most streaming platforms. Learn more at NBCSports.com/now. Here is a basketball offer you won't find elsewhere. Each Friday throughout the season, pick the player you think will score first in the game at BetMGM. If it's not your player, but he scores the second field goal of the game, you get your stake back in cash. You only get that MGM, the sportsbook Vaughn in Vegas. Here's how it works. Place a first field goal bet. If your player scores the first field goal of the game, you win. If your player scores the second field goal of the game, but not the first, you'll get your stake back in cash. Okay, let's close out talking Warriors-Kings, two strange teams in the Pacific Division. Warriors are currently 10th in the West. Good news for them, at least with Wemby going down. One less competitor for one of those play-in spots. Their over-under right now is set at 44.5 in the market with the under backed. The Kings, on the other hand, is just a kind of strange conglomerate of talent where the offense continues to look pretty solid overall, but there's not really much of a defensive ceiling. On this team, they have the same record as the Warriors. How do you handicap these two teams? Who do you think is the better team on neutral at the moment?
It's the Warriors. Wow. That happened pretty quickly too. The trades ultimately, and what we've gotten, kind of current rating for these teams. I have the Warriors at about a +2, and I have the Kings at about a neutral. So I would have had, if this was being contested halfway between San Francisco and Sacramento in, Walnut Creek, then I would say that you would have Warriors -2. Ultimately, this feels like a preview of the 9-10 As we stand here today, I think your 7-8 is going to be Houston, Dallas. I think your 9-10 is going to be Warriors, Kings. And at least if the Kings can, if the Warriors, stay healthy between now and the finish line, I think they'll be the 9 and they'll be hosting the 9-10. Steph Curry is still hugely positive, impactful player offensively. And actually, Jimmy Butler is rating fine for me. The Warriors, I think, have about the 10th best offense in the NBA and close to the 7th best defense as currently rostered, which is a little bit surprising, but the numbers are what they are. Bunch of that, I think, is really just because I heavily weight Darko, and Darko says Draymond Green is still like the second best defensive player in the world. But all that said, it is a Warriors team that I think is worth betting on in these kind of pick 'em-ish type of games, but I think they're going to be really well supported. If like I can see a very clear world where this Warriors squad opens up as like -3 at the Kings, and that I think would be wrong. So for me, if the Kings are catching more than 3 at home, they're the bet. And if this is somewhere in the ballpark of Warriors -2 to Warriors -1, then it's going to be a pass. If the Kings are somehow favorites, then I would look very carefully at beat reporters for the Warriors to find out if Steph's playing or not, because otherwise I don't know that there's really a world where the Kings are favored here.
Okay. Do you think that the Lakers are better than either of these two teams?
I don't.
That was quite a bad loss against Charlotte and kind of pretty solid reinforcement for anyone's fears about this Lakers team, because the market is pricing them, at least in futures markets, as, a tier or 2 tiers above the Warriors and Kings. And just watching them play and just kind of, just take a step back and think about the construction of this team. Their 3 best players all need the ball, and none of them really defend. Like LeBron is, I think, fine, but not a super impactful defender in this stage of his career. And I think that as much as Luka Doncic is unequivocally a better player than Anthony Davis, not sure that he is a better fit for this team than Anthony Davis. And the team just kind of made more sense with AD, just as a big and as a, the top 5 defender in the league over Doncic, who has redundancy with Reeves and LeBron. And I'll also like, obviously make the trade, just figure the rest out later. It wasn't made with the impetus to win the title this year, but of course, this team just doesn't look very good at the moment. And I know it's early, but there's not a lot of alchemy between those top 3.
No, I completely agree. And when the trade was made for the Lakers, I thought, well, this matters much more for their 26 title hopes than their 25 title hopes. Yep. And the market being so sure that they're going to be a factor is, I think, laughable. My modal outcome for them is that they have banked enough wins in a competitive West that they probably still finish 4, 5, or 6. I think the Clippers are clearly a better team, and I like Clippers Pacific, by the way. Although that number is getting away from you a little bit, I think. The ideal scenario for me, and the way that I've kind of stacked my futures, is that 4-5 is Wolves Lakers, because that gives us a really nice a really nice way into a Wolves series price. Wolves, kind of games line. The absolute dream is that Lakers 4, Wolves 5. Although I don't know how likely that is. I think Wolves do come through pretty cleanly in there, and then they do go lose to OKC. But Clippers, Wolves in the 4-5 would bum me out a little bit, just because I kind of like both of those teams right now. And Lakers Nuggets in the 3-6 would be one of the worst series of all time. Although maybe you get a fair price to really lay some games with the Nuggets. I think the Nuggets are getting the 2, though. And Grizzlies Lakers makes me want to puke, honestly, because I lost a lot of money on Grizzlies Lakers a couple of years ago.
This time the Grizz will win.
And well, dude, if it's deja vu all over again, and the Lakers are priced like they're currently being priced in the market, and they're like, anywhere near pick 'em against the Grizz in a 3-6 series, I'm gonna be like, what do I do? Because my numbers are going to be screaming Grizzlies minus 250, and they're going to be sitting there at like minus 120, minus 125, and that's going to be the series that determines my round one.
If that were the matchup in, say, the 3-6 or even the 2-7, that is like the embodiment of a series that the market would open as like pick and then would get bet out to Grizzlies minus 130 or something, because that has like huge vibes of Boston, Brooklyn a few years ago, albeit Boston's a different class of team to this Grizzlies team.
And then you're sitting down on the first Sunday of the playoffs, and that's the premier game on the Saturday final game of the weekend, and Ja Morant breaks his wrist going for a high flying dunk in the final minute of the fourth quarter, and you're like, oh, great.
Yeah. No, I can picture the text messages of Drew Dinsick asking me why Jackson Hayes is cooking Zach Edey over and over again. But hopefully,
why is Zach Edey out there?
Yeah.
What are we doing, Taylor?
Indeed. Okay, well, we're done for today. Don't forget to check out NBCSports.com for more information to help you with your wagers. Thanks for watching on the NBC Sports YouTube channel. If you're listening to us in podcast form, don't forget to rate and subscribe. Also, a reminder to find all your favorite NBC Sports shows on Amazon Music. Just head to amazon.com/NBC Sports. From myself and Drew, we'll see you soon.